Yes.
So welcome everyone to the second session of the Mediterranean talks. And this session is focused on the state of the Euro-Mediterranean relations, and the idea that came for this session was to have Professor Iván Martín from the Policy Center for the New South to come and talk to us about what is the current geopolitical state or the current things that are happening in the Mediterranean. We know there is a new commissioner for the Mediterranean. I would like to know a little bit more of what does this entail. There is the program of NEXTMED, and here we have actually a representative from the program, Humana. And yeah, so we basically wanted to know more about all these topics, and I think Professor Iván Martín is the perfect person to tell us more, since he has been more than 25 years working in Euro-Mediterranean relations. So, Professor, thank you very much for accepting the invitation to talk to us. It's a pleasure to have you on behalf of the Mediterranean Youth Council. For those who do not know me, I'm Pablo. I'm the co-president of the Mediterranean Youth Council, and I will basically be moderating this session. So now we will have a brief speech from the side of Professor Iván Martín, and then I will leave some time for questions after he finishes. But this is intended to be more kind of a dialogue. So without any further ado, Professor Iván Martín, thank you very much, and I give you the floor.
Thank you, Pablo. And just for the record, I always say that I appreciate if you can turn up the cameras, because it is much better to see moving faces than just black screens. If you can, I mean, I know that it can be difficult in some of your cases. Well, I'm Iván Martín. I'm going to speak to you 45 minutes, and I'm going to steal 5 minutes of them to introduce myself. I think it's important. I'm going to do what I have called the status of Euro-Mediterranean cooperation after 30 years of this scheme. And I will give a personal critical analysis of it, based, of course, on objective analysis, out of my experience of actually 25 years, as Pablo has said. I started to work on Euro-Mediterranean issues in 2000, a little bit earlier actually. I worked very intensively between 2003 and 2010, almost full time actually, with a lot of publications, a lot of seminars, so on. Then I got a little bit tired, and I went on to other issues, mainly working on migration and researching on migration. But I have kept a university course on Mediterranean affairs. Actually, I started to teach it in 2000 in Madrid for American students in Madrid, and I'm now teaching it in the University Mohammed Polytechnique in Rabat to mainly Moroccan students. So this makes a change as well, the perspective on Mediterranean issues from the South and from the global power from the United States. I am very sympathetic to your work as well, because I happen to be between 1987 and 1990, when I was still young. I used to be a member of the Youth Council of the European Communities. I was even member of the Executive Bureau of the, at the time, the Youth Council of the European Communities. So I know pretty well youth work, and at least as it was 30 years ago, and the work at the youth councils. Now I am on the one hand teaching a very specialized course on comparative international labor migration policies at the University Pompeu Fabra in Barcelona at master level. And I'm teaching, well, another course on international migration and one on Mediterranean in the 21st century in the University Mohammed Polytechnique in Rabat in Morocco, where I am also senior fellow at the Policy Center for the New South. And I have kept also a research line on youth employment, mainly in southern Mediterranean countries. But for the last almost 15 years, I have worked mainly on migration issues and labor migration issues. well, this as far as my presentation is concerned. So I have kept an eye on developments in the Euro-Mediterranean relations and cooperation. And actually this change, because I hope it is a change, please don't hesitate to interrupt me if you feel like doing it. I mean, we don't have any preset objective here, so you can, for instance, I will hardly speak about environment, and at least two of you have mentioned that environment is a key issue for your work and a key issue of interest. We can talk about Euro-Mediterranean cooperation in the field of environment in the Mediterranean at the end, if you wish. Basically, the idea of this change came when Pablo approached me because he read a recent opinion, just a short text, op-ed that I published at the Policy Center on the new commissioner for the Mediterranean that has been appointed in the new European Commission, which has started on the 1st of December. And then in this op-ed, I first took stock of the fact that the European Commission for the first time had named a commissioner of the Mediterranean, focused on the Mediterranean. It has even created a new Directorate General on the Mediterranean, and this is completely new. And well, when I started to see the details of this nomination, I thought that there was the risk that this was happening the same that it happened with the creation of the Union for the Mediterranean. It was a move towards institutionalization and co-responsibility, certainly. But so we all said, oh, how nice. Finally, we will have a Secretary General and co-presidencies and everything. But actually, it served to kill what there was in the Euro-Mediterranean cooperation until then. And there are some indications that this could be the case with the new commissioner for the Mediterranean and the new approach to the Mediterranean. It is very interesting to realize that in the mission letter written by the president of the European Commission to this new commissioner, who is Croatian, a former mayor of Dubrovnik, and she was already, this is a good thing, she was already commissioner in the former commission for the last 5 years. She commissioned this commissioner with a mandate. There is no single reference to the Union for the Mediterranean. It's very interesting that a new Mediterranean commissioner has no indication on what to do with the Union for the Mediterranean in the midst of a process, I will refer to that later, of reforming the Union for the Mediterranean that has been going on since 2023. It very clearly creates the Mediterranean, which is a good thing on the one hand, but it definitely decouples the East and the West, the East and the South, sorry. And this is dangerous because in the European Commission and the European Union at large, the priority is very clear since 2004 at least to the East, since the major accession of the 8 Eastern European countries, the priority has balanced to the East. There was a commitment 10 years before to keep a balance between resources assisting the South Mediterranean and resources assisting the Eastern European countries. And now the process of decoupling both neighborhoods has been completed. And this is, I fear, a way of risking less assistance to Southern Mediterranean countries, which have less political power within the European Council nowadays. Very interesting also in this mission letter to the new commissioner, there was no single reference to human rights or democracy as one of the main objectives of EU cooperation. There was a general reference to human rights migrants in relation to migrants, precisely the field where one could argue that the European Union is less strict in respecting human rights, but there is no reference to supporting democratization of human rights in partner countries in the southern and eastern Mediterranean. And this is exactly the contrary of what happens in the mission letter to the commissioner in charge of enlargement, where there is a very clear mandate to put democratization and human rights at the center of cooperation with those countries. And then there is the reference to the new Pact for the Mediterranean. The new Pact for the Mediterranean, we don't know exactly what is it. I'm going to show to you, well, I said to Pablo I wouldn't make a presentation, but I have made one very quickly this morning because I wanted to show you some tables, and I have just transferred some slides from my course on the Mediterranean. And well, this is the nice cover I have made in case you want it, even with your logo, you see, Pablo. Well, this is what we know about the new Pact for the Mediterranean, which is dated. It is very clearly said it is a new pact for 2025-2030. So basically the new mandate of the Commission. And these are the 4 elements we know so far. Comprehensive partnerships. And this is the code word for, well, focus on total tap. But whenever you look at comprehensive partnerships, this means migration conditionality. This word, this expression was first used in 2016 in a Commission communication where it made very clear that migration control was a condition for all other forms of cooperation between the European Union and the rest of the world. So this, and this comprehensive partnership, of course, are bilateral, not regional. So there is, again, a bilateralization of relations. And then just 2 sentences afterwards, they confirm it. They say, you will ensure, this is the letter of mission, that these comprehensive partnerships operationalize external aspects of our migration policy, covering border control and the fight against smugglers, of course, in respect of human rights. Scaling up and deepening trade and investment, trans-Mediterranean energy and clean tech cooperation. These are the 4 areas: trade and investment, energy, migration control, and the comprehensive partnerships. These are basically the European interest in the region. It's very interesting that there is no talk anymore about development, convergence, security. No. Energy, migration, trade and investment. And if you do that, you will have accomplished a good mission. And then this new communication plan to the region to fight anti-European stances, attitudes. They have already started with this wide consultation that they are launching with the EMED in Barcelona for the new Pact for the Mediterranean. Again, no reference to human rights or democracy in this new Pact for the Mediterranean. We don't know much, but what we know is that if we look back, I have prepared here a slide to look at in sleepless nights. When you cannot sleep, you come to this slide, and it is much better. We in Spanish, we say we count sheep. 1 sheep, 2 sheep, 3 sheep. So you can here count schemes of Euro-Mediterranean cooperation. You have here all of them since the creation of the European Economic Community, since 1995, the Euro-Mediterranean Partnership, the European Neighborhood Policy, with the 2 reforms in 2011 and in 2015, the Union for the Mediterranean, the new agenda for the Mediterranean, and now the Pact for the Mediterranean. I mean, one would say that somebody has looked at the Google or the word function of synonyms and pact, agenda, partnership. It's really repetitive. And you have here the advanced status, of course, no está view, the bilateral schemes. And also you have a proliferation of bilateral schemes with Morocco, with Tunisia, with Jordan, even with Turkey, with Egypt, with all countries in the region. I'm not going, I mean, of course, it would be worthwhile to go in some detail into each of these schemes and to see what has happened. But for me, the bottom line here is that the European Union has not much credibility now in terms of new initiatives of cooperation with the Mediterranean. Every one of these has basically failed to achieve its objectives. Of course, they have created areas or spaces for political dialogue, yes. They have, of course, channeled some cooperation funds to do some activities, and there has been beneficiaries, of course, but basically all of them have failed to achieve the objectives as they had mentioned them. I won't go further. Later in the discussion, if you want, we can go here. And then in parallel to the new pact for the Mediterranean, that we don't know what is going to be. It should be announced in probably May, June 2025. So you might have some role in it as Mediterranean Youth Council. There is a ongoing reform of the Union for the Mediterranean, with several papers, actually several non-papers circulating since February 2023 until November 2023. Then the whole reform has been blocked because disagreement between Morocco and other partner countries and the European Union. But basically, there is a project to reform the Union for the Mediterranean. We don't know exactly in which direction. I will refer to this later. But in order to discuss the status of Euro-Mediterranean cooperation, I think that it is worthwhile to go back to the original objectives of the 1995. You had not been born in some cases, but still it is the framework, the political framework for all Euro-Mediterranean cooperation ever since, including the Union for the Mediterranean. And the objectives have not changed much, even if the instruments and the ways to implement them have dramatically changed. These are the objectives, and basically they were to create an area of shared security and prosperity with peace, security, development, based on the principles of human rights and democracy and mutual understanding. You can go back to these objectives. I'm very fast, I know it, but it is worthwhile to look each of these objectives one by one. You don't need to have followed for the last 30 years Euro-Mediterranean relations to know that in terms of conflicts, we are much worse than in 1995. We have 2 civil wars in the region, Syria and Libya. We have 3 parallel wars between Israel and neighbors, Lebanon, Palestine, and Syria now, which was not the case then, which were in the aftermath of the Oslo process, the Oslo agreements. And the other minor, I would say no single one of the other minor conflicts of the Mediterranean has been solved. Cyprus has not been solved. Western Sahara and Algeria, Morocco is worse than ever, actually formally in a state of war again. So we remain in a situation much worse than 35 years ago. These first basket objectives were not achieved very clearly. What about development? I like to produce this table. I have produced it myself. You have the main countries. You don't have Palestine. I mean, I have just included the most important: Algeria, Egypt, Lebanon, Morocco, Tunisia. I have included Turkey because it is part of the Southern and Eastern Mediterranean, even if it is not part of the European neighborhood policy. I have also, for reference, included Sub-Saharan Spain, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Spain. And what I have done in this table is to measure the relationship between GDP per capita and purchasing power purchasing power parity, meaning taking into account the differences in prices. We know that eating in Morocco is much cheaper than eating in Spain. And this PPP, what makes is adjust for the differences in prices at current international dollars, because actually did the table for explaining migration pressures, and what migrants take into account when taking a migration decision is current dollars, their salaries. And you can see here that there was some convergence. For instance, just take one case, Algeria in 1995 had the Euro area GDP per capita in PPP terms was 2.83 times bigger than the Algerian GDP. So in the case of Egypt, the Euro area GDP per capita was 4.68 times bigger than the Egyptian one. Since I have included 4 years, you can see how this relationship has evolved, the ratio between GDP in Euro area and in the rest of, in the Southern Mediterranean countries. You can see that for all countries, there has been a certain, not for Algeria, but it is specific, but for all of the countries, there has been some convergence until 2015. And then in particular, after the COVID pandemic, there has been a regression. Overall, in the 30 years of Euro-Mediterranean cooperation, Morocco has gone from 6.47 times less than the Euro area average to 6.46. So basically, it has remained at the same gap. But other countries like Tunisia has gone for 4.39 to 4.51. So it is slightly divergent. Or Lebanon has gone from a little bit less than 3 times less than the Euro area average to 5 times less. So very clear divergence path. Actually, only Egypt and Turkey are on a convergence path. And I have included Spain also for reference. But even for Egypt, it would take 30 years to achieve 50% of Euro area average. So not something that is going to convince Egyptians of the good convergence pathway towards the European Union. For me, this table summarizes the failure of the Euro-Mediterranean cooperation to promote development and promote convergence as it was supposed to do, and as the European Union does within its borders. I will explain later a little bit why. This is another graph. I don't have the time to go into this in detail, but these 4 graphs represent in quite a nice way, I think, in quite a comprehensive way, the situation of unemployment in the region. You basically have a very high unemployment rate, much higher for women than for men. The upper left graph, the squares are women, and the grid circles are men. You can see that typically in Algeria, in Egypt, in Palestine, in Jordan, the unemployment rate of women is double that of men. Very high rates of young unemployment. You can see for every country 2 bars. The one to the right is youth unemployment, 16 to 24 years old. And typically it is also double as much as average unemployment. In the case of Jordan, up to 40%. And then what is unique in the world, we don't have that anywhere else in the world. We have increased unemployment as the young people are more educated. Unemployment for young graduates in the Southern Mediterranean countries and Turkey is much higher than for non-graduates. And this is the only case in the world. In all the rest of the world, you have the more education you have, the more chances to have a job, even if the job underutilizes your skills, even if the job doesn't match your skills, but at least you have a job. In the Southern Mediterranean countries, this is not the case. And this is in a framework where basically we have 3/4 of the female population in working age excluded from the labor market altogether. 3/4 of women are not even in the labor force. They have in working age, but they are not even in the labor force. So this means that joined to the high unemployment rates among those who are in the labor force, 80 to 85% of women are excluded from the labor market. And of course, this is the main factor behind the high levels of needs. Young people neither in employment nor in education or training, which in the region affects between 35–40% of the population. And we are talking about 26 million persons, not 26 million who are in working age, but are not in education and not in employment. For me, this is, of course, another manifestation of the failure of the European Union to create an offer for Mediterranean partner countries to solve this problem. It's very interesting, for instance, that for young and youth unemployment, you have in Europe the youth guarantee. Nobody, I won't go into this in detail, but nobody has ever spoken of extending the youth guarantee to Southern Mediterranean countries, which is what you would do if you would talk about real co-ownership, real partnership, real mutual responsibility. Okay, so I want here, since I'm talking about youth, refer you to 2 projects that were conducted between 2014 and 2017. It is quite a few years back, but they are the most comprehensive projects ever conducted, research projects ever conducted in the framework of the, ever conducted on Arab youth. They were funded by, at the time, Framework Program 7th, which was the predecessor of Horizon 2030 of the European Commission. Of course, this was in the aftermath of the Arab Spring. Suddenly, all Europeans wanted to know what happened with young in the Arab countries, and they funded these 3 million each euros, 3 million euros each programs. Sahwa, Researching Arab Mediterranean Youth Towards a New Social Contract. I was the coordinator, scientific coordinator of this program for 1.5 years. And Power to Youth, Freedom, Dignity, and Justice, which was, I was in the advisory committee as well. I have put the links to the websites there. You have really very good insights, a very good survey, for instance, in the 5 countries of the project, which was Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Egypt, and Lebanon. So I encourage you to go back, and even I can give you some contacts to organize one of these talks with one of the main researchers of one of these 2 projects. With Maria Cristina Paciello, with Jose Garcia, would be perfect. Okay, I'm going to remove this. I leave it there, but I don't want to go into too much detail. So, after having, in my opinion, demonstrated and I can go on, we can discuss what has been the development of democracy and human rights respects in the region since 1995. I spare you the exercise, but it is not very auspicious either. We can discuss, and there are some indications, even if it is much more difficult to measure, the advance of mutual understanding and intercultural understanding between Europeans and Southern and Eastern Mediterranean populations, which obviously is linked to anti-Muslim Islamophobia and anti-immigration stances in the European Union. So after having gone through this rather depressing and lackluster performance of Euro-Mediterranean cooperation, I will shortly refer to the Union for the Mediterranean, where is it, and the European Union bilateral cooperation with the Mediterranean countries, and end with two questions for further discussion. The Union for the Mediterranean, in my opinion, I spent 1 year of my life fighting the Union for the Mediterranean. 2008, I spent going everywhere to say this couldn't work. And this couldn't work because it has some birth defects. It is what the French call technically an abortion. And I will explain why. It is an intergovernmental organization, which is very good. We all were very happy that finally the Euro-Mediterranean cooperation was institutionalized, but no funds, no own staff, and no professionals working there. I will explain. No funds. There was, in theory, it should be funded through member contributions. Everybody knew that there would not be that contributions. Today, the budget of the Union for the Mediterranean is roughly 8.4 million euros per year, half of it given by the European Commission as a regional project, the same that any other regional project. So, of course, with a strong surveillance of how the funds are allocated and how they are spent. And the other money comes from development agencies, GIZ, Sweden Cooperation Agency, ACID, on an activity base. So it is an intergovernmental institution without own budget. And it has not own staff either. The staff of the Union for the Mediterranean is to a large extent made up by officers of member states, detached by the member states, and paid by the member states. So, of course, if you are paid by a member state, you report to your member states. And they are diplomats. They are not professionals. They are working on employment. They are working on higher university, higher education cooperation. They are working on water without knowing anything about it. They are diplomats. They do their work. They are good diplomats, for sure. But they are not experts on employment. They are not experts on blue economy. And they are they who are running the show in the Union for the Mediterranean. Originally, the Union for the Mediterranean renounced to have a regional reach. It is based on variable geometry. This was a pragmatic approach to the lack of agreement among the countries around the Mediterranean. But this has actually meant that it is largely irrelevant. I mean, they look the minimum common denominator on each of the topics. Projects and not regional strategies, not sectoral strategies, and all political elements, this is why I said before, all political elements removed from the table. No human rights, no democratization, no conflicts. This is not part of the remit of the Union for the Mediterranean. However, in an organization where you have Israel and Palestine and Lebanon and Algeria and Morocco, just making abstraction of conflicts is, at the very least, very illusory. I mean, it doesn't work. And so, despite that, as all bureaucratic institutions, it has struggled to find some place, and it has found it. It has created what is called the labelization of projects. There are 67 or 68 now regional projects, not region-wide, but multi-country projects which are labeled as Union for the Mediterranean projects. This doesn't entail any clear benefit for those projects, but no problem either. So every project is happy to put the Union for the Mediterranean stamp on it. Then it has created, and this is the only significant achievement of the Union for the Mediterranean, the regional dialogue platforms. It creates on a number of topics you have in the slides on water, on employment, on environment, on blue economy, on 15 different topics. You have regional dialogue platforms, which are basically meetings bringing together experts and policymakers and so on from all over the region to discuss the topics, but with no follow-up, actually. There is no resources and no monitoring process to see what is done of the diagnosis or the which are reached in those meetings. Again, pilot steered by non-professionals rather by diplomats, don't forget that. And then the ministerial meetings, which are not always ministerial meetings. More often than not, they are meetings with ministers, which is not exactly the same. You may have 20 ministers, but there are 43 member states. So this indicates the political importance given to those meetings by member states. But anyway, meetings with ministers where some joint statements are made, very often, as I will refer in a moment, actually not by all the groups, by the co-presidency, the Jordanians and the European Union, but again, with no follow-up. So it is sometimes even embarrassing. I, as a researcher, I see what they have done since the first meeting on employment in 2011. There has been 7 meetings on employment, I think, and they keep repeating the same thing over the years. It is really embarrassing. I mean, what are they doing? And then, of course, small projects here and there that they fund. All the funding last year in 2022, last year for which there are data, was 1.7 million euros for projects, grants. This is for the whole European Union, Euro-Mediterranean countries is ridiculous. So this is the status of the Union for the Mediterranean, which is rather depressing again. There is a project to reform it. I cannot inform you because honestly, I'm not informed about that. So let's see. They could do something good out of it, no doubt. But they need funds, they need own staff, and they need a clear mandate and not everything. And they cannot make abstraction of political issues. For me, these are the 4 basic conditions. And then the EU cooperation in the field, because the EU has, on the one hand, supports the Union for the Mediterranean, but it keeps its own regional programs and it keeps its own bilateral assistance programs. Now we are in the 2021-2027 budget cycle. Overall, it can be said first that there was in this budget cycle much more internal solidarity than external solidarity. The funds for international cooperation of the European Union were basically frozen. For the all the neighborhood, there were 26 billion euros. It sounds a lot, but we are talking about a population only in the partner countries in the Mediterranean of 270 people. Okay. For the Mediterranean, the last figure is 7 billion euros over the 7 years of the program. So this is basically 1 billion a year. And if we take out Israel and we take out Syria and we take out Libya, who are not benefited, we still are at 3.6 euros per inhabitant and per year. This is external. I mean, not everything is money, obviously, but money is something as well. And this is the budget for external cooperation in the Mediterranean of the European Union. In the same budget package, the European Union adopted the Recovery and Resilience Fund. Spain, my country, which is actually 5 times richer than all the average of southern Mediterranean countries, received 252 to be precise, 252 euros per inhabitant and per year of this recovery and resilience fund, plus 100 euros per inhabitant and per year of structural funds. So it is receiving 352 euros, which is exactly 100 times more per inhabitant and per year than Morocco or Tunisia or Lebanon. This reflects where the priorities of the European Union are and what is the relative importance given to cooperation with the Mediterranean. There are some programs that have been maintained over time. One is NEXTMED. This is the follow-up of the European Neighborhood Instrument Territorial Cross-Border Cooperation, CBC program, which actually started in 2007. It has evolved over time. I think that it is an interesting lab of innovation in cooperation, Euro-Mediterranean cooperation. It involves basically very small projects of never more than 5-6 million euros, often 1.5 million euros over 3 years, over 2 years, with countries, with partners from at least 3 countries, often 4 or 5 countries around the Mediterranean, local partners, local authorities, universities, civil society. The problem of these projects is that they are too micro to have a real impact, that they are too dispersed. I mean, you need 3 countries, often you have 6-7 partners, so most of the money goes in meetings and other project management activities. And very often, again, like in the Union for the Mediterranean, they are run by non-professionals. They are professionals in NGO or in project management, but they are doing youth employment creation without being experts in youth employment creation, or water management without, sometimes this is not the case, very often, unfortunately, this is the case. I talk under the control of Humana, who is, no, she's not anymore there. Anyway, you can contradict me if you want, but this is my analysis. Anyway, it opens up a lot of opportunities for small partners, small organizations to get involved in Euro-Mediterranean cooperation, and this is very good in itself. And then you have the regional programs funded by the European Commission. I couldn't find an updated list of them, but the European Commission funds regional programs in many different sectors, in Euromed Justice, Euromed MedStat, on statistics, on justice, on police, on youth needs with the ILO, on support to the Abraham Accords of Israel and Arab countries, all kinds to civil society. And these regional programs are, at the very least, good spaces for dialogue between actors in the region. But again, they are completely disconnected of the overall objectives of the partnership that I mentioned before. I end with, and I'm respecting my time exactly, I end with 2 questions that I think are important in this discussion, and in particular for you, for young people and for a Mediterranean Youth Council. Where is the Mediterranean going? What is the future of the Mediterranean? First, I have here, well, this is a project funded by the European Union as well on the future of the Mediterranean in 2000, actually between 2011 or 10 and 2014, which was called MedPro. And this is the final scenarios they created. First, on one axis, you have what type of Euro-Mediterranean cooperation process was adopted, either integration, which was not the case, or collaboration. And in the x-axis, in the horizontal axis, you have the level of sustainable development, to which extent countries achieve the objectives of the sustainable development goals. Very obviously, we are in the bottom left scenario, Euro-Mediterranean area under threats. In other prospective forward-looking analysis, they call it disintegrated Mediterranean, where it is difficult to find a common thread of policies and cooperation throughout the Mediterranean, and where threats prevail over opportunities in the region. Anyway, we can discuss further, but this is my first question. It is worthwhile to discuss what is happening with the Mediterranean. And the second one, and which is very much linked to this, actually, oh, you haven't seen the slide, but never mind. The second question is whether the Mediterranean exists. I have been first time in 2010, but then several other times. And now I start my courses on the Mediterranean, trying to demonstrate that the Mediterranean doesn't exist anymore. That it has existed as a region in the past. There was a project to create a region that didn't exist anymore in 1995. This was a region building project, very clearly. It has failed. And today we have some common challenges, but apart from environment, we don't have commonalities that justify treating the Euro-Mediterranean space as a single region. The dynamics in the Southern European Mediterranean countries has nothing to do with dynamics in the North African or Middle East countries. Even between Middle East and Maghreb countries, it has again nothing to do. And it is very interesting that even the European Union in 2018, for the purposes of the European maritime strategy in the Mediterranean, they divided the Mediterranean in 5 different subregions. Because even in terms of maritime strategy, which is what brings us together, the sea, even in those terms, they couldn't find a joint narrative for the 5 areas. One is the Black Sea, which is not strictly the Mediterranean, but the other 4 are for sub-regions within the Mediterranean. My personal take, but this can be challenged, of course, is that the Mediterranean doesn't exist anymore as a region, that it is very interesting as a pedagogical device. This is why I keep teaching a course on the Mediterranean. But unfortunately, the 30 years of Euro-Mediterranean cooperation in these different guises, these guises I have described, have not managed to create a Euro-Mediterranean region. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ivan. So it was many things that you talked about in the talk. I think it was amazing, and I have so many questions, and I think there are many questions that come from the audience too. So now is the time for all of you to ask questions to Ivan. Just raise the hand if you can, and open also your cameras if you haven't done so far, so also like we can see each other and we can also start a discussion. But I just want to say, Ivan, before like everyone else jumps to the discussion, is that it's a sad picture that you present to us. And I want to challenge it a little bit, because if not, I would be a little bit sad leaving after this talk, right? I really do think that that problem, in my opinion, comes from the policy makers, and how this has been constructed, especially from Brussels. And I think this has been a major problem, in the sense that if you look at many different Mediterranean countries, even in the Southern European countries and countries of the South Mediterranean, they look to Brussels. They read the geopolitical situation through the eyes of what is happening in Brussels, not what is happening in a Mediterranean context. Because, as you said, in the Union for the Mediterranean, there is no real talk. There are no real ministers. There are no real decisions being made. And my question about this is, I think I have two main questions. I have many more, but I would just select two that I think are important. One of them is this a technocratic turn again? So before there was some, let's say, some credibility into the political elements, the human rights, development, democratization. Right now, all these elements are gone completely. So is this a try to go back to a technocratic idea, and which for me also seems very interesting in the sense that the UFM has become also very technocratic. They are also not going into any political side. So why leave the UFM again outside? The other question is, if you think, and I think that probably we don't, any of us, we don't have any answer to this, but the situation in Syria in 2011 sparked a lot of reactions in the European Union in general. And now we have, let's say, kind of an end of the war. I don't think it's actually an end. Maybe there will be more things happening, but do you think this is something that will affect this new Pact for the Mediterranean, this new, let's say, relations? Is this going to affect something? Because we know that Syria is not included in the Union for the Mediterranean. But yeah, so how do you see the situation? What things you think might happen? And yeah, thank you very much again for the very inspiring and very condensed talk about all these topics. And please, everyone, if you want to do any other question, just raise your hand.
Do you want me to answer now very briefly?
If you can go for it.
Okay. A few questions first.
Yeah.
I'm aware, and I'm aware that the overview I have provided is rather depressing, and it is sad, as you have said. But honestly, I think you have to know what is going on before you can fix anything. So, and I remember when the European neighborhood policy was adopted in 2003, immediately in March 2003, I published a very commending article saying this is what needs to be done. But then it has been diluted, and I have to acknowledge that. I cannot help. So I try. I will check the chat later for the question from Morocco. So I try to be objective and naive in my approach. This is what they do. This is the resources they move, and this is how you can interpret that. And yes, it is depressing. For me, the main reason is that the European Union has always been the engine behind Euro-Mediterranean cooperation. Actually, the Mediterranean as such has never interested a lot to the Southern Mediterranean networks. It now interests Turkey, but in a different way, as a new regional power, middle power. But Morocco, or even less Egypt or Algeria, or they have never been very Mediterranean in this sense. They have never felt a Mediterranean region existing. They are very aware of in the case of Morocco, of the relations with Spain and France, of course. In the case of Tunisia and Egypt, the relations with Italy. But the Mediterranean as a region building project came from the European Union as a way to create a wider European Union as a backyard for economic and geopolitical purposes. But then they didn't mobilize the resources for doing that. So they have failed in this sense. But, and you're right, the drive came from Brussels, but when it didn't come from Brussels anymore, like it is the case of the Union for the Mediterranean, it doesn't work. Because probably we don't have in the Mediterranean the right mix of countries to create a region. We have to accept that. Maybe it is much better to come back to smaller sub-regional dynamics in the Western Mediterranean, in the Eastern Mediterranean with gas. This has been done with the Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum, for instance. Okay, so this is my reflection on that. Second, I'm not sure to agree with your political versus technocratic approach, because employment is very political. Environment is very political. I mean, I would say it is rather political versus project approach. Everybody's happy to become bureaucrat. I have a project, I have very limited objectives, very limited budget. I implement the project, I'm judged for that, even if I don't change anything. This is very clear at NEXTMED and cross-border cooperation level. It is normal because there are small projects, small actors, local ones, but it is as clear as that at Union for the Mediterranean level as well. Okay, and because it is mixed with a political, diplomatic, geopolitical process, nobody says the emperor is naked. Nobody says, listen, sometimes you do. I mean, I remember 2 years ago, Josep Borrell, the former High Representative for Foreign Policy of the European Union, came to the regional forum in Barcelona and said, well, this is nonsense, all what we are doing here. This is completely irrelevant. But well, he can afford to do this once. But the machinery is taking him. So I think that it is rather not technocratic versus political. It is not the topic chosen, is the ambiguity. And is the, you cannot build a region with Israel and Palestine today. I'm sorry, you cannot. And if you do, you are basically giving arguments to those who say that the whole Euro-Mediterranean partnership is just a way of favoring normalization between Israel and Palestine. Because if they are in war, they don't cooperate on water. I mean, this would be nonsense. So, and then on Syria, what we have seen in the last 30 years in the Mediterranean is increased fragmentation. We already spoke, you see the history of the Mediterranean of David Abulafia, for instance, when he describes what has happened after World War II, is precisely fragmentation. But fragmentation at the national level, so between nations, pan-Arabist ideologies were sidelined. Now fragmentation has come to a new level within the countries. You have Libya fragmented, you have Syria fragmented, and this is not going to change for a long time. I mean, I don't think there is any scenario over the next 10 years that can prevent Syria from keeping fragmented. Even if, in the best of cases, even if there are some peace, more or less democratic, no, the Kurds are not going to give up what they have achieved. There are Islamist militias here and there who are going to keep pieces of territory. So you say how this will affect. Well, I remember what I said in 2006. In 2006, I was invited to Lebanon, to the St. Joseph University, to discuss with the students the development of the national plan for the European neighborhood policy. It was a consultation and they invited me. And it was in July. Only 10 days after I left, there was the bombardments of Israelis of all over Lebanon. And there they learned who were the neighbors. The neighbors were not far good-willing Europeans. They were Israel and Iran for as far as Hezbollah is related. So for the Middle East, honestly, at the very least, what I see is that the dream of European Mediterranean cooperation, if anybody had it ever, now it's gone. I mean, we are talking about reconstruction, about rebuilding what has been destroyed. and this will absorb all resources, and it is legitimate. So the regional project is too far from their immediate interest, in my opinion. I'm talking about the Middle East. The Middle East, and not including Turkey. Turkey and North Africa may be different. I, again, don't see a rationale for keeping this region today, but I see, of course, a rationale for cooperation in the Mediterranean.
Yeah, thank you very much for this answer. So there was Salma asked one question before. So Salma is also the vice president of the Mediterranean Youth Council. So she was asking in the chat, is there a need for more comprehensive and effective evaluations of the policies implemented within the Mediterranean context? Okay. In other words, take into consideration, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, just to take into consideration the direct and tangible effects on the environmental, migration, and energy transition issues.
Yeah, well, first, can you please briefly introduce yourself? What do you do in Morocco, apart of being the vice president of the Mediterranean Youth Council? Because I have been living in Morocco now for 4 months, so I'm interested in knowing where you come from.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, first of all, I hope that you're able to hear me.
Yeah, I think we can a little bit low, but yeah.
Okay, so well, thank you so much, Iván. That was very fruitful to hear what you had to say on this situation in the context of the Mediterranean. My name is Salma, and I am the co-vice president of the Mediterranean, but also an administrative manager at a marketing company here in Rabat. So I am fascinated by the UM6P and also like the Policy Center of the New South. So it's a pleasure to meet you or meet you.
Okay, very good. We can talk about it in another occasion. I'm now going to answer the question. For me, the question is yes. And at all levels, I mean, it's very interesting between 2011 and 2000. I mean, as you know, in 2011, there was the Arab Spring. Immediately after that, very quick, the Commission reacted very quickly with a new partnership for shared prosperity and democracy. This was the one, you can see it in the table I have shown before. New partnership for shared prosperity and democracy in the Mediterranean. And basically saying, as from now, participation in the ENP is conditioned to democratization. And in November, it even described what is democratization very precisely. Okay? And as part of that, they all of a sudden became transparent. They started to publish one report every year on every country on the implementation of the ENP, and one sectoral report every year on the implementation of the ENP in the trade and investment sector, in the environment sector, in the human rights and democracy, in basically 8 sectors that the European Commission grouped its action. They were published in 2011, 2012, 13, 14. Never again. They were a very interesting exercise, very candid, in evaluating the achievements and failures of the European neighborhood policy. Of course, these evaluations continue to be done somehow, but very often in a very bureaucratic way, not in a strategic way, and not informing the next steps of cooperation. And for me, this is the big problem, is that because it is diplomat, because, I mean, let's be serious. All of those who are interested in the Euro-Mediterranean is a particular animal. We are invited to conferences. That's it. And this creates also a particular attitude. Criticism is not easy because you risk not to be invited again if you criticize an ambassador or whatever, or if you criticize the system. And it is also not very elegant to be invited by the Union for the Mediterranean and saying, well, this is nuts. It's not very nice. And it is very stupid not to accept the invitation if they invite you, maybe because you know somebody even worse is going to attend it anyway. So what I say is that it has created some distorted discourse on Euro-Mediterranean cooperation, where open evaluation of what has been achieved is not easy or almost impossible. And this should be done. This should be done, absolutely. So thank you for your question. I fully agree on that.
Yeah, so if everyone else wants to jump and do a question, you are welcome to do so. If not, I may ask other questions. And also, if you want to also answer back, Salma, that's also fine.
I have a question.
Sorry, before you, just to complete the answer to Salma, I will give you a concrete example. Everybody agreed, and agrees even now, that one of the major challenges of the Mediterranean is youth employment. Nobody questions that. In 2004, actually, I was asked to produce a report on youth on employment and the Euro-Mediterranean Partnership, funded by the Spanish Cooperation Agency, the Euro-Mediterranean Trade Union Forum, and the Friedrich Ebert Foundation. And it was a big team, 18 researchers, 3 Europeans and all of the rest, 2 from each of the countries, 8 countries in the southern, from Morocco to Syria. Syria at the time was part of the game. We did 3 regional seminars, one in Maghreb, one in Masrek. The final conference in Tunisia, they prohibited it when we were already there. It was time of Ben Ali, and we did a second one in Madrid. And it's very interesting because we came to the conclusion that nobody was even looking at, not even evaluating, looking at what was the impact or lack of impact of all Euro-Mediterranean cooperation on employment, even if it was agreeable, the most important issue and the most important challenge. The same happens, as you see, with environment, with energy transition, migration. There is a lack of objective evaluation and analysis of Euro-Mediterranean politics at all levels. Of course, it is much more serious at bilateral budget support programs that maybe 35 million, that are NEXTMED projects, which are maybe 1.5 million. But the problem is the same. Sorry, Maria Angela, now you can talk.
Thank you.
No problem at all. Actually, I wanted to thank you for this this talk, and I wanted to thank you guys from the Mediterranean Youth Council for letting me in, because it's really insightful, really interesting. So I really appreciated your approach, your critical approach to the Mediterranean affairs, your FEM specifically, and I have to say that in some way I share it, because I used to be like the typical person who used to romanticize the Euro-Mediterranean affairs. I still kind of have a positive perspective about all of this. As Pablo was saying before, I want to end this video call with a little bit of hope. But since you mentioned before that basically the Mediterranean doesn't exist or doesn't exist anymore, would you think that maybe this perspective can be challenged in terms of interpreting Mediterranean region as a crossroad of cultures? Is there a chance in terms of culture, in terms of youth participation, and I think that this council is a great example of this, to conceive the Mediterranean region as one area where this kind of participation, sharing is possible? Because as you said, from a diplomatic perspective, political perspective, there's no political willingness to like solve problems. Also, when it comes to climate change, which is a common threat, it seems that there's no common perspective on that. Do you think that, at least in terms of culture and youth participation and youth involvement, we can consider the Mediterranean region as a whole or not?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. First, when I say the Mediterranean doesn't exist, I mean the Mediterranean as a region according to the theory of regionalism. And in geopolitical terms, I mean, for me, the Mediterranean exists. I have one session in my class, it is 20 minutes, where I project my Mediterranean. And I go my experience of the Mediterranean over 35 years. And for me, of course, it exists. I have been to Alexandria, to Byblos, to Thessaloniki, to everywhere, and I have had experience, and they have some unity. So this romanticizing view of the Mediterranean is legitimate as a cultural approach to the Mediterranean, as a cultural one, okay, and life experience one. What I don't see is how to translate this into geopolitics, okay, and what I don't see is the rationale of much of what is being done. Now you question. Honestly, I don't think so. But I don't think so because in my experience, I spent 4 months a year now in Morocco for the last 4 years. I have been visiting Morocco, Tunisia, and all of the Mediterranean countries, but Morocco and Tunisia very particularly for the last 25 years. And the divide is too big. The divide is too big in terms of mutual representations. I mean, in Europe, let's assume it, in Europe, the discourse on the Arab Mediterranean countries is monopolized, the public discourse is monopolized by the far right. This is, and there are many people with experience in North African countries. It's not that everybody is like that, but the public discourse, and hence the politics and the media reflection, is largely monopolized by far right positions. And this makes this kind of approach very difficult. Having said that, I think that even if it is not a region, I don't think it makes sense as a region, and you can see it in the Anna Lindh Foundation. The Anna Lindh Foundation for the Dialogue Between Cultures. I won't go into details, but I mean, it doesn't help to the dialogue between cultures, okay? But we are neighbors, even if there is not a region, we are neighbors. And between neighbors, it is absolutely necessary in all contexts to promote youth exchanges, to promote cultural changes, to promote cultural diplomacy, if you want, to promote tourism even. Okay, so, and this is, it is fine to do it or to promote a small project between local authorities, or this is very positive in itself, regardless of the outcome of this process in terms of development or conflict resolution or democracy. In itself, just bringing together young people, school people, and letting them change and know each other is very positive. So it has to be done. What I don't believe, well, never a lot, but I don't believe anymore in, is about the transcendence of these changes in terms of region building and peace and democracy and development in the region. But yes, I don't see this Mediterranean as a crossroads today. The Mediterranean is a dividing line, very clearly. Not only in migration terms, also, but in cultural terms. And look, the last edition that was done 4 years ago, I think, they have not repeated the exercise, of the Mediterranean intercultural trends of the Anna Lindh Foundation. Look, the perceptions in the southern Mediterranean countries and in the European countries is completely different on so basic issues as family, education, priorities in life. So my answer, sorry, is not, but we have to keep trying.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for this answer.
So my bottom message is that I don't want you to commit suicide tonight.
No, I think we still have a lot of ideas to, especially the Mediterranean Youth Council, to, yeah, even if it's that way. Also, I think something that happens to us is that we try to go to UFM forums, to let's say more international forums, but the first institutions that help us were more regional. And and from the Mediterranean Youth Council, I think we also saw this divide. But yeah, I mean, there's still many things going on there. I have a question, but I want also to open the floor if there is someone that has one or two questions, because we also have to wrap up soon. So if someone else wants to go for the question, if not, I will ask mine. No? Okay, Miss Sarah, please go.
So maybe in another try to create hope, maybe, because like you said, I'm trying not to commit suicide here. Is promoting the identity of Mediterranean among young people enough, can be like a way forward? Because I grew up in Egypt since I was very young with multiple identities. And I think this is the reality of all Mediterranean countries. And some of these identities are actually conflicted, like being Egyptian and being a Muslim. This is actually conflicted identities. And the one that explains me most is me being Mediterranean, because the one explanation of having so many cultures and diversities and people coming in and out, and cultures stacked over cultures that produced me in the end, was the Mediterranean identity. So is promoting this enough through projects, through, I don't know, bigger and better communication, even starting from us youth, can be a way forward to make this something people can look up to? Because I know for sure that people are still in our countries, especially in the South, are still trying to figure out who they are after a long colonialism happening from thousands of years. Can this be a way forward? I want your opinion, your honest opinion about this, and you lack no honesty, so.
I think it is difficult, and it is difficult because I don't see this Mediterranean identity. It has existed in the past, no doubt. I mean, you can go back to the big historians of the Mediterranean. There is a wonderful book, the best book written in the last 50 years on the Mediterranean is The Corrupting Sea by Nicholas Parcel and Peregrine Horden. And this is a very, very difficult to read book on actually historical anthropology, very dense, really dense, with more than 100 pages of commented bibliography. And reading 30 pages sometimes is a torture, but it discusses over more than 1,000 pages exactly that question. Does the Mediterranean identity exist or not? And the conclusion is that this is not the case anymore. It coincides with what I see today. Personally, I am very scared about identity building, but this is what has been tried in the Mediterranean and has not worked. I mean, region building also means the attempt to create an identity. This is why there are Mediterranean affairs studies. This is why we are here today, and there is a Mediterranean Youth Council, because there are some policy to generate this identity, or at least common space. But having quite experience in both sides of the Mediterranean, of course, there is a part of the young people, I would say an elite, not necessarily rich people, no, but elite in terms of cultural and prospects of life, who, yes, share an identity, but you have always had that, and you share this identity also with Latin American persons, and with only you don't have chances to meet them. But I don't see a Mediterranean identity as an alternative to the current divide, honestly, for young people at large. For elites, yes, but this has no big added value, apart of the cultural dimension. I mean, I have here plenty of books on Mediterranean that I enjoy reading, and this is also the Mediterranean, of course. But I also enjoy reading history of the Roman Empire, and it doesn't exist anymore. This is what I try to say. So, my Sarah, for the identity, I understand, you're right, young people ask themselves who they are, but they ask themselves even more, what are their prospects in life? This is the key question for young people. And unfortunately, today, despite all this course, the prospects in life of most Southern Mediterranean people are very different, and very worse, much worse than the prospects in life of most of Southern European people. And this divide makes very difficult to create a common identity, in my opinion. It can be even questioned whether there is an European identity, despite everything. So
thank you very much. So if someone else wants to jump in for one last question, because we'll have to wrap up the session.
Hi.
Yeah.
Do you hear me?
Yes. Can you present yourself? And,
yeah, I am Siwar. I am from Tunisia.
Yes. Sorry. Before that, I see the book that you have mentioned. This is a book he wrote later, Peregrine Horden Allah Alone.
Yeah.
But the book I'm referring to is The Corrupting Sea.
The Corrupted Sea. Okay, I will send the right one, because this one is the last one. Yeah.
Yeah, this I have it as well, but no, the good one is The Corrupted Sea. Sorry.
Yeah. So I was saying I'm Siwar. I'm from Tunisia. I just wanted to comment on my Sarah comments, and then or question, and then I have another question. So I don't think it's a good idea to have a Mediterranean identity, because an identity have some core elements which are or mainly it should be religious and language, and I don't think for the Mediterranean to tackle religion is something very sensible to do. So my question is, you talked about political crisis, or what's going on some countries on the Mediterranean, regarding Syria, Libya, and the Palestinian cause or conflicts. But it have always been there, and one of the main reasons why we do politics or we have countries is to solve political crisis. Isn't and the benefits of the stronger countries to not make or to fail initiatives such as the Mediterranean Union, so it would be easier to the stronger countries to negotiate or have bilateral direct discussion with less stronger countries. For example, for the EU to discuss with Tunisia directly on migration is way better than to discuss with Tunisia, Algeria, Libya, Lebanon, and it would be in their benefits. So is it in the benefits of some countries that they don't do much efforts to make such initiatives work, so they still can benefit from the lack of union in the region?
For me, and this, if you remember before, when I referred to the MedPro scenarios, I referred to two models of Euro-Mediterranean cooperation. One is a collaborative model, which is the current one, and one is integration model, which is the European Union accession model and the European neighborhood policy model. Why I mentioned that, I'm going to come back to this in a moment, but I just asking your question, Suad. You are Suad?
Siwar.
Okay, no, because I only see SG and I don't know you, so I thought it was Suad, but it's okay. First, I'm not very fond of any conspiracy theory. So I really don't think that they meet and they say, let's fragment. No. But for me, it is very clear that the increasing fragmentation in the region and in some of the countries of the region is directly linked to foreign intervention. And the European countries are not innocent in this foreign intervention. You even have, in some cases, like in Libya, Italy supporting one side and France supporting other side, and the European Union somewhere floating over them. Okay, so I don't think that this is deliberate, but this is the outcome of foreign intervention. Yes, and for me, the case of Tunisia is very clear, and it shows the model of cooperation that is implemented in the Mediterranean. If Poland does something like controlling the constitutional code by the government, all the other members of the European Council mobilize, the European Commission threatens with suspension of structural funds, and Poland gives in because the stakes are too big. If Tunisia does exactly the same, the president of Tunisia, in 2021, the European Union sends a team to negotiate migration control. These are the differences. This is the differences between they and us. Poland are part of us, the European Union. We cannot allow non-democratic developments, and there are many in the European Union, unfortunately, but major ones, we cannot tolerate them. Outside the they, we can. So for me, the big difference is that all these years of Euro-Mediterranean cooperation have not managed to integrate Southern Mediterranean countries into us. And this is the big failure of the European Union in the region, because it is true, it's a very Eurocentric process. But for sure, if I remember between 2004 and 2008, I was advocating for extending the structural funds to Tunisia and Morocco. I'm convinced that the situation in Tunisia and Morocco would be very different now. In Tunisia, no doubt. And much better in terms of economic development and political democratization. I don't know whether I have answered your question, but the question is yes, obviously, they negotiate better with country by country or even with factions within each country. But I don't think this responds to a deliberate, I don't think they are the bad guys discussing about how we control the region. It's much more difficult than that, much more sophisticated than that.
Thank you.
So thank you, everyone. I think that's the time to wrap up this talk. Thank you very much, Iván. It was a pleasure to hear you. And even though it's a big challenge that you are saying, I think also in the Mediterranean Youth Council, we want to challenge some of the things you said in the sense of how we can build more Mediterranean. But of course, I think it was amazing to hear you all of the things you were saying, because they are you know so much, and all of these things were very interesting. And thank you all of the rest for coming, also especially the ones that are not from the Mediterranean Youth Council, like Maria Angela. Also, thank you for coming a second time. The idea is that the next time in mid-January, we will have a session with the NEXTMED program. I talked to Yumana, which is an officer working in NEXTMED, and they might come with us and tell us about the next call of applications. So So this is the idea for the next section of Mare Nostrum talks. And yeah, thank you very much for connecting. Have a happy holiday season, all of you. And yeah, just enjoy these days and the new year. And thank you very much, Iván, once again.
Bye-bye.
And
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much, and see you around. Bye-bye.
See you around. Bye-bye. See you all. Thank you very much.
Bye.